Hello everyone, Master Zen 1001 here, and in this video what I'm going to do is press Q, go under settings, and control click about in order to load Pong, which has recently been improved to now show tips in addition to a small video loader at the bottom of the screen that will just show various ads for various things that are normally in the URL loader. Of course, clicking on any of those will take you to those websites as well, but I just wanted to just start off with a game of Pong just to start things off light. Not a lot has gone on in this particular update. Mainly our goal was to improve our support for 2.93 in addition to solving a few things. But the new addition of Everscroll and the new and improved Selection To Boolean V3 will definitely be two of the main things to stay for. But hopefully users won't find this update log too long. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and begin going over what's new to HardOps 987.6. When it comes to HardOps, you can just press Q, and under settings, the About button will let you know if you're up to date. Just the fact that the icon is red means that I'm out of date, so by clicking it, it'll tell me the current version of HardOps, but it'll also tell me that it needs an update. If we expand the Hops button, we can see under the first button of the Hops button area that there's also an area that's telling us that we are currently needing an update. In fact, there's even buttons to link us to each individual market, as well as a link to tell us exactly how to update. So with that, HardOps is always able to let you know whether you need to update or whether you're up to the current version. So without further ado, let's continue. UV display is a classic. You can access it by pressing Q, going to Operations, and choosing UV display. It also has a hotkey of QOU, which also works in edit mode. The thing about UV display is that if you're in edit mode and you have a face selection and you use Operations and UV display, it'll display your selection. However, once you go back to object mode, it will no longer display the entirety of your UVs unless you go back and you control click it, or actually shift click it, and then you'll be able to see all the UVs, which is kind of an unintuitive way to have a relationship with UV display between object and edit mode. So this was something that we sought to improve over this latest update, and also thanks to a suggestion by Zen UV, it's now better than ever. So here I have a crate that I did previously in a video about UVing. If I press Alt V, I can choose solid texture toggle and view the UVs on it without having to go over to an alternative viewport like LookDev. So if I were to press Q and we choose UV display, we now see that the UVs that are in play are now selected. If we go in edit mode, I'll select just this top face and we'll just display the UVs, and we see that while it displays all the UVs, only the selected face will be highlighted. So this was something that was a bit of an oversight previously, but I'm happy to announce that it's now been resolved, so now you can actually see your UVs in relation to other UVs. And thanks to Zen UV, UV display goes even further. Zen UV is an add-on made by Sergey Tyapkin, a last name I never get tired of attempting to pronounce, and it attempts to streamline the UV editing workflow, and now it also supports UV display. So with it active, I'm just going to tap in edit mode. We're just going to choose Zen Unwrap, and we see that we have our unwrap. We also have our UVs being displayed. I can select another piece, tap in edit mode, we can Zen Unwrap it, it's good to go, jump into edit mode, Zen Unwrap this one as well, and you see that it makes it as easy as possible, and with the power of UV display, it just helps ground the experience a lot more. Whenever UV display was first improved upon and re-added back to HardOps, the first person I wrote was actually Sergey to tell him that this feature was ready for him to begin implementing it into his tools. However, he even takes UV display a little bit further than even we do, because, for example, he has these like transform options, right? And so if I were to say select an island and activate transform, and I click to transform, you can see that I'm able to move the island with the UV display actually updating every time that I do that. I could even rotate islands if I needed to get a particular result, and this is something I haven't even begun to dive into yet, but just seeing the power of UV display, being able to assist him in any capacity, is something that I just found to be amazing, and I look forward to expanding on this in the future. So Everscroll was added to HardOps as a way to expand on the ability for users to recall their cutters primarily using bool scroll, and to roll through their modifiers using modifier scroll. Modifier scroll is one of my favorite ways to just kind of roll back through the process and troubleshoot and find out where things fell. there's a large road ahead for it as far as where I want to take modifier scroll. But the first step of it was, of course, remaking it, which is the form that you see now. But just letting you know that it's one of the many ways you can get in and quickly access your booleans. Just jump into Everscroll and you can just scroll through and just quickly access whatever boolean is that you need, with the alternative being that you can press Alt W, switch over to Hops tool, and just hold Control and just hover over an area, and it'll highlight using dots all the particular cutters that populate an area depending on the type of workflow you're using. However, new to this version of HardOps is the ability to auto scroll, which means that if we were to, say, shift-click Everscroll to jump into modifiers, we can now press Shift and Space, and it will begin playing back the modifiers automatically. And this can be a lot easier for whenever you're wanting to, say, make a GIF and post it to Twitter like I'm one to do. I will just start recording the screen and just let this play, and there will be a little timer even letting you know kind of how it's going. So in a way, the timer works as a profiler. I plan to have it more implemented into the lower area at a later time, but for now I have been enjoying having it just sit up on screen, allowing me to kind of read through the modifiers and the speeds that they're being scrolled through to just kind of troubleshoot and see, hey, here's where exact starts breaking down the stack and making things a lot slower. Cool thing about this is I could press Shift Tab to jump over to a different scroll. Like, for example, I can jump over to children and it will just scroll through all the children. I can Shift Tab, jump over to Bool scroll, and it will just process all the booleans. I could Shift Tab, jump back over to modifier scroll, and it'll process all the modifiers. And now when I jump, it makes more sense versus before. In fact, I'll just slide in using the space mouse, and we can just see it scrolling through all the different children, and we can even have it automatically scroll through all the booleans. So this is just an interesting way to just let your work automatically play back in the event that you're using a modifier based workflow. But that's pretty much it. We just wanted to add the ability to auto scroll. It's been on the whiteboard for months, and I'm happy to announce that it's finally been added to HardOps. And now as a user, you'll be able to get in and just automatically scroll through your modifiers without even having to press a single key afterwards. Give your middle mouse button a rest. So in addition to what we were talking about with auto scroll, you can press Control K to bring up the HardOps preferences. And over in the properties area, there's a preference where you can set your auto scroll time. I've set mine to the lowest possible time. However, you can set it to something like 0.25 if you want your auto scroll to take place a little bit longer. The interesting thing about auto scroll is that it takes place independent of your timeline. So this scene actually has an animation going. And so if we were to shift click Everscroll and press Shift Spacebar to allow it to play back, we can actually see this animation play back while scrolling through modifiers in an automatic fashion, which does make it slow down just a little bit more because we're adding a little bit more overhead. But it's just a really interesting way to look at and present your models in an interactive fashion. So I hope you and other users are able to get in and find some enjoyment out of auto scroll. Selection To Boolean has received an immense amount of improvements over the course of this latest update, but when we initially made it, it was for Blender 2.83.12, and things changed over the course of later versions of Blender that made the tool actually degrade in performance. So to show the original version, we could press Q and go to ST3 Mesh Tools and just choose Selection To Boolean, and we can just click, and we see that we're able to fluidly jump into the extrusion process, and the text is able to stick with the cursor, and everything's just hunky-dory. And you can even press A to jump to make mode, or you can press A to jump back into cut mode, and that's exactly how Selection To Boolean is supposed to behave. However, let's minimize this, and now I'm actually using version 2.93, but I'm using a previous version of HardOps 987.5. If I were to go in here and actually use Selection To Boolean, we see that things will behave just a little bit differently. In fact, right now it's making a fool of me and actually performing exactly the way it's supposed to. But normally this would actually come with a considerable amount of lag. So now we actually come to the present where I'm using my current version of Blender and my current setup, and we tab in edit mode and we select these faces and we press Q. And we go under ST3 Mesh Tools, and we can see that Selection To Boolean is performing exactly the same as it was in the previous two examples, because I just can't seem to recreate the lag that was actually happening with this. But there were issues being reported with Mac users that we were checking into, and it turned out that there were definitely some performance improvements able to be made with this, enough to the point that we were able to just simply rewrite the concept altogether. So I'm happy to announce that there's now a new version of Selection To Boolean in this version of HardOps, and no matter of what version of Blender that you're using, it should be more stable and faster than ever. So Selection To Boolean only works on derived geometry. So with this shape, if we were to shift click modifier scroll and just auto scroll, you can see that this is built up of a series of modifiers, and as we scroll through them, it's not a destructive shape, it's a non-destructive shape. So first thing we'll need to do is go in and use Smart Apply, and by Smart Applying, we've now applied the base level of geometry. We just select a couple of faces and just choose Selection To Boolean, but just letting you know that it's also under Boolean, so you can go under Boolean, choose Selection To Boolean, and the first step is going to throw you into is the inset phase. So it's important to not overlap because we haven't tried making any sort of corrections for those sort of cases. However, once you get the geometry right where you want it, which is always limited by the amount of corners you have present, you can actually click to progress into the extrusion phase. And so here we see that we were able to perform that extrusion. However, this area has some doubles that are just a little bit too close for comfort for me. And so we'll just get in and correct them. Same thing with this area. And taking a look at this, everything else appears to have came out correctly. And so to get this to show up on the other side, I'll select this shape and the shape I want to mirror across, and just press Alt-X, and using the default of mirror, I'll just click on the axis I want to keep. But just like that, that's how you would use Selection To Boolean in action. However, I do see a feature where you can use Selection To Boolean to extract derived geometry from non-destructive meshes in order to continue adding on in a non-destructive fashion instead of destructively as you've seen me do here. But more on that in the future. Uniquify supports a plethora of cases when it comes to HardOps. One of my favorites is the ability to support radial arrays. However, there are cases in which it didn't support. So here I am in 2.83 using a previous version of HardOps, and I'm just going to draw a box, and we will just draw this out in 3D. And I'll just go back and grab this edge, and let's just convert this into a curve using Curve Extract, but right click to cancel. So I'm going to select the curve, select the mesh, press Q, and we'll choose Curve Modifier, and use the F9 to roll through options until we have it deforming properly on our curve. So if we wanted to, say, duplicate this shape and move it, we would need to select the curve, the cutter, and the mesh in order to press Shift D and move it over. So that's actually where the job of Uniquify comes in, where you should be able to just make a basic selection, go under Operations, and shift-click Uniquify in order to duplicate it and move it. However, we see in this case that it doesn't actually work out. In fact, it fails. We just say that that is a failure. So this was reported to us by a user, and I'm happy to announce that this unique case has now also been supported. So if we jump over to the other Blender, I will just tab into Edit Mode, and we'll just draw our cut, and I'm just going to make our selection, and we'll just Curve Extract this and right-click to cancel. Select the main shape, perform a box cut. We'll shift it to live, and we'll use the array inside of HardOps in order to set up a 3D array. And then we'll select both of them, press Q, and do a curve modifier, and then use the F9 once again to scroll until we find the correct way to sequence it, and GZZ to move it up. And I always put a loop cut to kind of quarantine these areas where there's a cut, especially when it comes to curvature. And we could press SX and actually scale this down to make it fit on the shape. So just like before, you know, the old school way of doing things is just selecting everything and just pressing Shift D and just moving it over like you see it. So, but now I just want you to know that if you are using the latest version of HardOps, you can press Q, and when you shift click Uniquify, it will actually duplicate the curve case as well. So this is now supported by Uniquify, even though this isn't part of the same parent chain, but definitely is part of the same Boolean chain. So relationships when it comes to Booleans and meshes can get a little complicated, and so I wouldn't so much say this was a bug, but just a type of oversight when it comes to the type of relationships that can be had between meshes, Booleans, and curves. HardOps contains a filter apply that we refer to as Sharpen. With this particular mesh, we have a pretty much boilerplate setup of mods where everything starts off with Booleans, then it goes into a mirror, a bevel, and a weighted normal, which is really what I call a Monday night. So if we select this mesh and we were to control click sharpen in order to perform C#, it will perform basically a filtered apply, where it will apply all the booleans and solidifies, but it will leave behind bevel, mirror, array, and other modifiers. And this is kind of the way that we've worked for years. However, when it came to working with different types of modifier stacks in the 2.8 era, we had to think differently, and C# simply wasn't able to cut it anymore. So to simplify for the new generation, we came up with something called Smart Apply. So with this object selected, if we press Q, Smart Apply is actually located inside of Operations, probably not for long. And Smart Apply is also located under Add Modifier, under Apply Modifiers. We see it under the Control Behavior. It's also under Mesh Tools, which is probably its intended destination. Smart Apply is actually a mesh tool. However, it also fits in well as an operation. But the thing is we have Smart Apply in a plethora of places for users to be able to quickly get to it and locate it and use it. And so if you run Smart Apply, there are no options. If we press F9, there is no F9. It just runs Smart Apply, and basically its goal is to apply all the modifiers leading up to the last bevel and weight it normal and leave those unapplied for the most part. However, let's undo this. So if we were to go in and run C Sharpen, we see that C Sharpen pretty much does the same thing, except it doesn't apply to weld and it left the mirror. Versus Smart Apply would have actually got rid of both of those because it would have considered those integral to the modifier stack being assembled. So that is one of the areas where it differs. However, there's a couple of different ways you can apply things when it comes to HardOps. Another way is to use something called Modifier Scroll, and just clicking on the checkbox to apply which modifiers you want to apply, and then just clicking to be done. But the thing about this particular update is that now if you press Control K and you go to key map, under the Sharpen key map, you now have the ability to map Smart Apply. So I actually have Alt and Control set to do nothing, so I will set that to be Smart Apply. And so this means that now if I were to select an object, press Q, and Alt Control click Sharpen, we've now ran a Smart Apply, which is just an alternative way to quickly apply mods and get continuing on with your model. So just letting you know that this has been a long time request. I've wanted to do it for the longest, and now I'm happy to announce that now you can go and Sharpen and run Smart Apply, meaning that Smart Apply is now a main menu level option. Sharpen, located in the Q menu, is one of our most important and most powerful Q menu options. It is a core of pretty much everything that we do. If we hover over it, we see the tooltip saying that left clicking will just run something called S#, control clicking will run C#, which is a filtered mod apply, shift clicking will run auto smooth, alt click will do a weighted normal, and control shift click will do a resharp, which is a recalculation of sharp marked edges. However, you also have the ability to remap this by pressing Control K. You can go to the key map and you can actually choose what you want Sharpen to do. New to this version, you'll now be able to go under any of your keys and actually map an area to be Smart Apply. Smart Apply is an area of HardOps that we've been working quite hard on to make applying a lot easier for users. And now by being able to map Smart Apply to your main menu, you can now apply things in a way that is more befitting this new generation. C Sharpen is kind of a classic way of working. However, Smart Apply is a successor of C Sharpen. And so in the event that you're wanting to try it out in your main menu, just by pressing Control K, you can go under the Sharpen key map and just easily map any of your Sharpen functions to be whatever you want it to be. And then of course, saving your preferences will ensure that these will persist across to your next session. Dice and twist has always been a bit of an odd one. If we just took our shape over in this previous version and just started off making some cuts and separations, we can quickly expose some issues that come up whenever you're using dice and twist. So I'm just cutting this shape up, and then I'm just cutting some stuff out around it just to make it interesting. So if we select both these objects and we go under Mesh Tools, we can perform a dice on both of these objects. But if we want to twist it, we could press T and it will transition into a twist afterwards by also running a Smart Apply, which is required in order to twist these. But if we click, you'll see that the second object twisted and the first object did not. And this is because both objects need to be applied and joined together in order to twist in the method that we're trying to do here. And this is what we sought to improve in this latest update. So here I have this sci-fi door that I made recently. If I shift spacebar, just play the timeline, it'll just play. It was just a quick box city test, you know, nothing major. And we'll just select this, press H, hide the camera, basically hide everything that's not needed. And I'm just going to select everything, make sure I have an active selection, and we'll just alt click dice, and we'll just roll some loops. We'll press T to twist and click, and we're now twisted, but we see that it didn't twist the way that it's supposed to. That's why we have the ability to press R to rotate a shape 90 degrees, and we also have the ability to press the key F in order to flip a shape. So sometimes you want to flip a shape. If we look at the help, you see that there's quite a few interesting hotkeys here. For example, if we press Shift D, we can duplicate the shape, which will automatically flip it, allowing us to get an inside and outside piece. But just like that, when it comes to multi-select, we're able to dice and twist it a lot easier now than we could with previous versions. Of course, if you're having issues with dice, be sure to check your algorithm. Some cases may work better with knife or mesh intersect, depending on the type of meshes that you're feeding it. I see an issue right here that probably would have been resolved if I just would have changed my algorithm due to it having a series of manifold meshes rather than just being one continuous mesh. Over to the last update of Mesh Machine, Machine added an interesting little feature of this little axial flick that could be used in order to perform mirroring. And I found it to be a little interesting. It gave me an idea, and that was that what if we used it to perform axial changes when it comes to array. So here I am adjusting a 3D array, and we already had the ability to hold Alt and change which axis that you're adjusting. In the event that you need to do that, you could just hold Alt and just roll the wheel in order to change what axis. But we wanted to try the ability to just hold Alt and actually use a little axial guide in order to change array, which turned out to be a rather good idea. So just another one of those machine coincidences, but I'm happy to announce that whenever you're inside of array, just holding Alt and flicking will allow you to flick which direction your array is going. In closing, I just want to say that I'm immensely proud of the work that goes into this release and every release. The work of the team is truly what keeps these tools going. By no means am I a coder. I always love saying that because, you know, people will hit me with the Python questions. I'm like, ooh, not me. I mean, I could talk a little bit about it, but really I always discuss Python in such abstract terms as far as tasks and what I need it to do, what I wish it to do, but it's up to the coders to truly explain to me how things truly function. But ST3 has done exemplary work on this release, as he has with all releases. Usually the goal with everyone as they integrate into the team is to get their work to a point where users shouldn't be able to tell developer efforts apart. When it comes to the product in the end, everything should just flow together seamlessly. And so I'm always proud of seeing everyone's work just come together so seamlessly to create an experience that truly can't be matched anywhere else. But our work continues, it always continues, and I look forward to the next updates that we'll be bringing forth. And so with that, I will wrap up this video, and I'll see you guys next time, and thank you for watching. If you're new to HardOps, there's also the ability to display tips. By pressing Q and going to settings, the About button has its own tooltip. So if we look at it, pressing Control Shift will play the screensaver. But before that, I'm going to click play, and then we'll Control Shift click it, and we now see that Hops is able to display tips at the top of the 3D view just while it's playing back. So I plan to add tips over the course of each update, just letting people know of various things to try, and we'll be implementing various types of systems to hopefully improve our delivery system of tips across to you, the user. But hopefully users will find this as a nice way to just sit in and read a little bit about how to use Hops for various things just on the fly while just sitting and waiting. But with that, I'll truly wrap this up.